You often hear how we need to spread democracy into the world because it gives people the freedom of choice. Well, you are going to learn today that this so-called democracy doesn't need to be spread anywhere in the world. The American voting system is one of the most powerful forms of manipulation because it allows you to think you are actually making the choice of your elected officials. Why? Because they tell you anybody can become president here. Look at you saying, I raised my kid up real nice. One day they just might become president of the United States of America. We hear that a lot, don't we? Well, let's look at the 3 requirements. What are the 3 requirements to be president? Number 1, you must be a natural born citizen. 2, you must be 35 years old. And 3, you must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. Now, with those generic requirements, tell me why all of the presidents except one, Martin Van Buren, are all direct descendants from King John of England, aka one of the most evil men in history. And for all the new people who are like, that's too long ago to matter, it was only about 849 years ago. Almost all of the presidents being descendants of a king of England doesn't sound very American to me. Let's look at more recent examples. A current example is Obama. He has 6 U.S. president cousins, both Bushes, Ford, Johnson, Truman, and James Madison. Let's not forget he is also related to Cheney, Bush's VP. Oh, and we can't forget Obama's 12th cousin, J. Rockefeller. How about election '08, Obama versus McCain? They are both cousins through King Edward I from the 1200s. What about Obama versus Romney? They are both related, being direct descendants from King Edward I. What about Bush versus John Kerry? Both cousins and members of the secret society Skull and Bones. When Bush was asked about it, he said it's so secret he can't talk about it. These members are usually given key positions of power and influence because they have made a pact to push the New World Order agenda. Other big name members you may have known are William Taft, the 27th president, Prescott Bush, the senator and Wall Street banker, George H.W. Bush, 41st president, and then Dana Milbank, who works for the Washington Post. And you better believe he is posting lies. Now, I'm going to use the Bushes and Clintons as examples of how messed up this election system is. Under Reagan, there was a vice president. That was George Bush Sr. He was a Republican. He was a vice president for 8 years, 1981 through 1989. Then he became president for 4 more years right after 1989 through 1993. Now, one big question I want to ask all y'all, how in the heck were y'all okay with a former director of the CIA becoming president? He was a CIA director. I'm talking about George Bush Sr. That don't even sound right to me. Anyways, 12 years of a Bush. Then we get Bill Clinton, Democrat, for 8 years. That's 1993 through 2001. Then we get another Bush, Republican, for 8 years, 2001 through 2009. What the heck is going on here? In 2007, we get Obama, the black Bush, on the scene running for president against Hillary Clinton. Obama is a Bush without the last name. Remember, he is cousin to George Bush and Sr. Then a Clinton runs against him for the Democratic nomination as if there isn't anybody else who can. Obama during the campaign says, we need somebody new, not Hillary Clinton. He then gets in office and puts Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State. What the heck wrong with him? So far, that's 28 years of Bushes and Clintons. Then Hillary steps down from the Secretary of State for Obama's second term so she can run for the 2016 election. Throughout Obama's second term, all we hear is Hillary going to run 2016? Now she running. And we even got Jeb Bush running as well. That alone should show you how fraudulent this system is. Out of the millions of people in America, we keep ending up with Bushes and Clintons? If you say that's normal, you lying. People make excuses. Well, it's because they have the money, and whoever has the most money has the best chance to win the election. Not only is that not fair, but it goes against the whole anybody can be president thing. It's more like anybody in the bloodline who wants to be a hardcore sellout for Wall Street can be president. That's right, I said Wall Street. Those are the guys Obama said he was against. But Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, for example, wasn't against Obama. They knew his tail was lying. They became one of his top donors and gave over $1 million to his 2008 campaign. They also gave $230,000 to his opponent John McCain's 2008 campaign. They gave over $1 million to his opponent Romney's campaign. And we see they have given Hillary Clinton over $700,000 throughout her career. Also receiving $782,000 from Citigroup, major funding by J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and the list goes on. If these names sound familiar, it's because they are also the same people who funded Obama and Mitt Romney and Bush. This is why no working class person should be giving money to these sellouts. It's a shame that they even ask for donations from us when they are fully funded by these banks. We shouldn't be giving them anything. You can write that down. These candidates, the news says, are the most credible are the Wall Street candidates. They are paid to sell you these puppets. See, they benefit when their paid off candidate gets into office. And that's not just for presidents, but for any other office. What kind of benefits are we talking about? Well, for one, a blind eye gets turned to all of their dirty deeds. For two, they get more money. I mean, like a whole lot of money. I'm talking about numbers that don't fit on a calculator money. In September 2008, the economy crashed and they said we got to bail out the banks so it doesn't get worse and turn into the Greater Depression. So the $700 billion bailout, aka the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008, aka Wall Street bailout, was enacted to save the day. First problem with that is the $700 billion. That's a whole lot of money. Second problem, the bill had no oversight and ended up going up to a whopping $29 trillion. And the big banks were more than happy about that. Citigroup getting $2.5 trillion, Morgan Stanley getting $2.04 trillion, Merrill Lynch getting $1.949 trillion, Bank of America getting $1.344 trillion, Goldman Sachs getting $814 billion. Pay attention. Now, the bill was supposed to be for $700 billion. And then you see Goldman Sachs receiving way over that amount with $814 billion. J.P. Morgan Chase receiving $391 billion. And it's funny how they get this money. And then they go on to buy Washington Mutual. Bush, Obama, Romney, and Hillary are all in favor of that bailout. They are all in favor of the Federal Reserve. By the way, while they were bailing out all of these too big to fail banks with trillions of dollars, the Fed also paid the big banks to not lend money to the public, the broke people. They worked out a nice deal that if the big banks deposit the money in the Federal Reserve, they can earn a 0.25 interest on that money. We're talking about the money that they're not loaning to you. That's more than you get paid in your savings account. How much money are we talking? I'm talking about $1.6 trillion that they are keeping in the Fed and not loaning out to the people so they can make $4 billion of interest a year. Now, before I explain the Federal Reserve, you must know the 2008 collapse of the economy was a manufactured collapse and that it was planned in advance. Information was leaked out that this would happen in the exact month of September 2008. It's going to happen again. But way worse, and you can thank the Federal Reserve. The creation of the Federal Reserve was a power move by the Illuminati bloodline families to gain full control of the money supply of America, to then gain full control over the money supply of the world. You with your crazy conspiracies. They don't say that on the news. They don't say that at my school. Shut up, Joker. There's a reason for that. The real truth of the matter is that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government since the days of Andrew Jackson. And that was a quote from U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933. What does U.S. President Thomas Jefferson say? The Bank of the United States is one of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution. Andrew Jackson didn't like the private central banks either. He's quoted saying, "The bold efforts that the present bank has made to control the government and the distress it has wantonly caused are but premonitions of the fate which awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like it. If the people only understood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning." Jackson hated the Bank of the United States, which was a private central bank like the Federal Reserve. The name Bank of the United States was a cover to make it seem official. The name really doesn't matter since it's private. It could have been called Chase That Dragon Bank. That might blow the cover though. The Bank of the United States, like the Federal Reserve, bought off candidates, paid them to change positions. Jackson told this to his VP. The bank, Mr. Van Buren, is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. He then vetoed the renewal of the charter for the Bank of the United States on July 10th, 1832. That meant that the bank was done for. Then on January 30th, 1835, the banks really did try to kill him in an unsuccessful assassination attempt. Bring it back. So this backs up what the quote from the 32nd U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt said. The real truth of the matter is that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government since the days of Andrew Jackson. President James A. Garfield said, any party which commits itself to paper money will go down amid the general disaster covered with the curses of a ruined people. He was for the gold standard, which restricts the private banks. James A. Garfield was mysteriously assassinated July 2nd, 1881. Why? Well, let's ask the 7th Vice President, John C. Calhoun. A power has risen up in the government greater than the people themselves, consistent of many and various powerful interests combined in one mass, and held together by the cohesive power of the vast surplus in banks. Again, that was John C. Calhoun, the 7th Vice President of the U.S., warning you about these jokers, not some bought and paid for news anchor on Fox News or MSNBC. Not some joker who always slouched on the couch watching TV, eating chicken nuggets, talking about, he just stupid, that's what it is, because I never heard of this. You never heard of this because you be on that couch talking about, quiet down Kardashian zone, looking joker. What is the Fed? The Fed, as we know it, was created from the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Because people were aware of the tricks of the private banks, they were against the big banks. We're talking about in those days. That's why the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was marketed to the public as something that was against the big bad private bankers. So the people would rally Congress for this to pass. The problem with this is that the big bad private bankers are the one who wrote the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Wait a minute. In a secret meeting. Wait, on a private island. Wait for it. Called Jekyll Island. Now how shady can you get? Extra shady if you have people like the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan writing the act outside of Congress for Congress to pass, which gives a private bank the power to print money out of thin air. Doggone it, you might as well give Fat Jason the power to print money out of nothing. Let's just forget we've been using gold and silver as the one true valuable currency for the past 5,000 years. You're going to see why these sellout politicians like the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 so much. Watch this. So the government needs $500 million for whatever reason. They go to the Federal Reserve, Fat Jason, and say, Fat Jason, can you loan us $500 million? We need it really bad. Then Fat Jason writes a check to the government for $500 million and say, here you go. Now remember, you got to pay me back with interest. Here's the big problem. Fat Jason didn't have $500 million in the first place. So how was he giving somebody else $500 million? He just wrote a hot check. And in a normal situation, that check would bounce like rubber and he would be in jail. But that's not happening. We have to pay this joker back with interest after he wrote a hot check. This is why Fat Jason has a lot of friends, because he has the ability to write unlimited checks for unlimited amounts of money and still remain above the law. Sellouts know they can go to Fat Jason and request ridiculous amounts of money, and it won't be a problem because they both know he is just writing fake checks. And then they just print the money out from the fake checks. Break it down. Our money is being created out of thin air. Your dollar exists because somebody asked somebody who don't have a dollar for a dollar. Then they wrote a hot check. Then the dollar was printed. Let's call them hot dollars. Hot dollars represent all of the dollars we have in supply. We work for these, some save up for them, and put them back in a bank. The bank then loans them out and creates more hot dollars. Some people buy stuff with it, and others buy assets like gold, silver, real estate, etc., which is the smartest thing to do since those actually contain value, unlike the hot dollars created out of nothing. Currently, the world's #1 reserve currency, the United States dollar, is a fiat currency. If you are not alarmed by that, you should be. Fiat currency is a glorified object, frequently paper, that has no real value but is used as legal tender because the government says so. Fiat currencies have a 100% failure rate, which means the US dollar that was created from a value of 0 will eventually turn back to 0, which means all of y'all hoarding up dollars are eventually going to have more than enough green toilet paper to get you through life. See, the more dollars that are created out of thin air, the less value the dollar has. Just like when you have a small supply of something in existence like gold and silver, it has more value. The private banks don't like gold and silver as a currency because it restricts them. What to remember about the fiat currency? The private bank's plan is to purposely crash the dollar and crash all other countries who own fiat currencies. They want the world as a whole to crash so they can pose as the saviors and introduce their solution, which is a one world government with a one world religion, which is supposed to justify this in World Bank like the Federal Reserve, but this time in a cashless society where everyone is microchipped and has the money in the chip. This cashless society makes the new World Bank's job easy because they can just type the numbers in the computer to create the money. So you see, the Fed is horribly corrupt. It has no oversight. Nobody really knows who owns it. It doesn't report to Congress, the president, and definitely not the people. It's always writing hot checks, yet it has never been audited. Let's say that again. Out of all of its 100 plus years of existence, the private bank that's supposed to be responsible for our economy has never been audited. Yet people working at the Gap get audited every time they step on the register. What the heck? The government media also sells the Federal Reserve as something that's supposed to protect the economy and consumers. In reality, they are the ones who gave us the Great Depression and took the dollar that used to be worth 100 cents to now being worth only, watch this, 4 cents. That type of stuff shouldn't have happened if we had the Fed. They were supposed to stop that type of stuff from happening. Oh, wait, then I hear somebody. What about JFK? Well, he said something that is not allowed for presidents to say. He said he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds. See, the CIA plays a key role in ushering in this new world order. So this is why he was assassinated by the government on November 22nd, 1963. You must understand there is a new world order agenda. Let's just hear from the former director of the CIA. We have before us an opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, rules all nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping forces to fulfill the promise and vision of its founders. And that was George H.W. Bush. We have the United States of America. Break it down. What is it really? A bunch of states that didn't used to all be together, but they united to become the United States of America, which is controlled by private banks through the Federal Reserve. That's just an incremental step in the big plan. You see, Bush mentioned the New World Order will be run by the United Nations. That's because the New World Order is a world government. Just like the states are united, all the world's nations will be united and called the United Nations of the world, with one world currency, which means there will be one bank, like the Federal Reserve, controlling all of it. United States of America, 2 United Nations of the world. Stop being naive. If anybody has the chance of controlling the world, it's most likely those with the money. I'll take it even further. If anybody has the chance of controlling the world, it's most likely those who can write unlimited checks for an unlimited amount of money, creating money out of thin air, then taking the money to buy off politicians, universities, scientists, news media, and anything else that's able to be sold. To understand the American election system, you must understand that all the major media outlets have been bought off by the private bankers. It's been this way now and before you were born. They hype up these two parties, Democrats in the blue and Republicans in the red, as the only credible parties who can become president and hold office. They work as a distraction so you don't see the real controllers, that is, the owners of the Federal Reserve. Many know the Fed as the Illuminati Bank. Remember, they print the money and they even remind us that it's their money and we owe them. You see on the dollar it says Federal Reserve Note, and then on the back it has the Illuminati Pyramid. Both parties act like they are against each other, but like I showed you earlier, both sides are related and receive sellout money from the same big banks like Goldman Sachs. They work as an effective cover for the Illuminati because the masses don't really pay attention to facts. Why y'all be doing that? They just pick a team and root for them like in sports. Your favorite team wears a certain color. Democrats and Republicans have different colors. They corner the masses by saying it's left versus right, which is broadly saying there are only two choices. This is the reality of the left-right paradigm. They prop up the Illuminati, and without them, the Illuminati gets exposed. And see, the parties themselves can't stand alone because people will see how much they suck because there's only one thing to blame. And it will be toppled over by the masses. The masses would then start their own party. That's why both parties lean on each other to block the other parties out. They act as the official opposition to each other. Look at that crap. The news also works to legitimize that in the eyes of the masses. They don't allow any third parties or independents in the debates or general election coverage because it would expose the corrupt two parties. For example, during a debate, you would see Obama saying he would send 5,000 troops to Iraq to keep Americans safe. Mitt Romney would then say, "Oh, you really don't care about keeping Americans safe? I would send 6,000 troops to Iraq." Then Obama would say, "Let's be clear. I will send 7,000 troops to keep Americans safe." Now keep in mind, sending troops overseas in this manner is part of the New World Order agenda, as well as NDAA, Patriot Act, NSA, TSA, which gives full control of the tyrannical government to monitor the masses to keep them from rebelling. Pretty much anything that leads to a New World Order, they both agree on it. That's why you see Congress pass bills without even looking at them. Think about it. And there's no excuse for that. And if there was an independent voice in the debates, it would expose that. Because it would sound like this. Independent voice speaking. I say we don't send any troops over to Iraq to fight and get killed just because the military machine wants to make some money and get power for private bankers. You want somebody over there? Send yourself and your own kids, not other people's kids. Then the moderator would say, "What is that noise? What is that? Did you hear that chinging noise?" Completely dismissing the independent voice. How are people getting caught up in this? Well, both sides are designed to stand for certain causes that are broad enough for the masses to fit themselves into whichever category. If they agree with more of the left's portrayed beliefs, they will say they are Democrats. If they agree more with the right's portrayed beliefs, then they become Republican. Race, social class, gender, religion, and sexual orientation are key tools they use to keep the masses divided against each other so they won't figure out that both parties work for the same agenda. These tools of division are their favorite because they are so effective in making people stupid because they react off emotion and not from logic. Democrats fake like they are the ones fighting for the underdog. They portray to be the party for minorities, poor people, gay rights, climate change, and gun control. The main reason why they get away with the gun control push is because they portray to be people who really care about the well-being of people. So you would think them wanting to disarm citizens is a safety concern. Republicans, they portray to be a party who fights for rich people problems, also known as the rich white people party, out of touch, white people in general party, rich minorities who are not happy working so hard just to pay all these taxes and we got people doing nothing on welfare party, tax cuts, anti-gay rights and wars, and sometimes Hispanic party. Let's break down one of their key division tools they like to use, gay rights. See, because gay people need to feel like they have a voice too. So Democrats gladly accept this role, even though they only do this to get gays to accept the New World Order. That's right. To Democrats, gays are a political pawn. Y'all better pay attention. They don't care about anybody's rights. You don't really notice it because the fake opponent teammate, Republicans, play the role of the anti-gay party. This only reinforces that Democrats must really be for gay rights. Republicans say all these bad, out-of-touch things about gay people, so then they can give the Democrats their talking points only to strengthen their support. The stronger the support for one side, the stronger the left-right paradigm gets. That means it's harder to see the criminals on top, the Illuminati bank. The Democrats always get to play the good guy when Republicans go on about the gays. Here is where the little game ends. Most of the Republicans are gay. That's right. They meet up every year at secret all-male Bohemian Grove parties. They make sure they invite all of the most influential people in the world. We talking about big business people, banking, politicians, actors, university, media heads, think tanks, Rockefeller family, U.S. presidents, future U.S. presidents, defense contractors. We even have big names going there like George Bush and George Bush Sr., Jeb Bush, Newt Gingrich, Jimmy Carter, Walter Cronkite, Bing Crosby, Clint Eastwood, even Al Gore, a Democrat. And that's funny because there's a video of Bill Clinton saying, oh, only Republicans go to Bohemian Grove, playing dumb. We got Danny Glover, Richard Nixon, and he said it was the gayest thing he ever seen, by the way. You can look that up. Colin Powell, Ronald Reagan, Donald Rumsfeld, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, just to name a few. What are they doing here besides planning out the world's next decade that includes future presidents? Well, they order gay male escorts. And there's only one reason why I can see why gay male escorts could be coming to an all-male retreat. And it ain't playing basketball. Besides, I don't think David Rockefeller can dribble a basketball 2 times. So you telling me Danny Glover is gay? Well, he is at a gay party. Look at him kissing this guy. Why Glover goes there, I don't know. You should ask him. But what is the point? The anti-gay stance by Republicans is a fraud since they are gay, and their fake stance is only used to give credibility to their two-party teammate, the Democrats. The Democrats took over the gay vote deceptively through the CIA-created counterculture of the 1960s. Time to break the Democrats' favorite card. No, don't do it. Don't do that. No. Too late. I'm about to do it. No, please. Please don't do it. I'm doing it, Joker. Democrats act like they are the party for minorities. And at this time, majority of black people automatically vote Democrat without question because Democrats portray to be for them. People thinking this is normal, but understand in history, this just seems flat out weird. Malcolm X said black Democrats are chumps. Now, why would he say something like that? Good question. It's time to learn what is really going on. 1854. The Republican Party was formed to stop the spread of slavery against the still pro-slavery Democrats. 1854 again. The Republican Party opposes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was an act to spread the institution of slavery into places that were previously forbidden. It's messed up. 1857. The Democrats were behind the Dred Scott decisions. Those meant that blacks were not persons but property. Check out this quote from Democrat Roger B. Taney. Blacks had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. 1860 signals election of the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, and first time Republicans took over Congress. Democrats were angry about this, not just because they lost, but because of the strong anti-slavery and civil rights positions the Republicans had running on in their platform. Now watch this. The Southern Democrats were so mad that they left Congress and seceded and created the pro-slavery Confederate States of America that had its own president. We're talking about February 4th, 1861. Northern Democrats hated the Republicans' anti-slavery and civil rights views, but they were against the secession. Understand that. Let me break down again how horrible this is. We had Democrats secede and create their own nation just because they wanted to keep slavery. We had a civil war because Democrats wanted to keep slavery. Let's go to some excerpts of what the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander H. Stephens, said in his cornerstone address, March 21st, 1861. And remember, Alexander H. Stephens was a Democrat. Okay. The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institutions. African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our former civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. The general opinion of the men of that day, revolutionary period, was that Somehow or other, in order of providence, the institution, slavery, will be evanescent and pass away. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man. That slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. Ooh, that's some reality right there. That's how he was. Let's go to 1863. Abraham Lincoln, Republican, issues the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves while the Democrat Party still supports slavery. 1864. Republicans repealed the Fugitive Slave Law that was passed by Democrats. The Fugitive Slave Law required Northerners to return escaped slaves back into slavery or they had to pay huge fines. What ended up happening was it turned into an excuse to kidnap free black people and bring them down to the South with no oversight. What does that mean? Meaning many could be falsely accused and they were denied jury and habeas corpus. 1865. The 13th Amendment passes and abolishes slavery forever. The Republican Party supported it 100%. The Democrats supported it 23%. Oh, they don't tell you that type of stuff. Let's look at December 1865. The KKK launches as the terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. This is key to understand because it was created to take power back from the Republicans. The target was Republicans. In this time period, blacks voted Republican. I keep saying that. They would have a problem figuring if a white person is Republican or Democrat, but they knew when they saw a black person, they would be Republican. Not to say KKK wasn't racist. They were very racist. But blacks were targeted by them because they were Republicans. If they were Democrats, we wouldn't have had this. This group would murder and torture blacks and promise to release them if they voted Democrat. If you violate the agreement that you would vote Democrat, you were killed. Also, many never got released but were lynched. They also attacked and murdered white Republicans. Here's some instructions from the military arm of the Democratic Party, red shirts. Every Democrat must feel honor bound to control the vote of at least one Negro by intimidation, purchase, keeping him away, or as each individual may determine how he may best accomplish it. We must attend every radical meeting that we hear of, whether they meet at night or in the daytime. Democrats must go in as large numbers as they can get together and well armed. Behave at first with great courtesy and assure the ignorant Negroes that you mean them no harm. And so soon as their leaders or speakers begin to speak and make false statements of the facts, tell them then and there to their faces that they are liars, thieves, and rascals, and are only trying to mislead the ignorant Negroes. And if you get a chance, get upon the platform and address the Negroes. In speeches to Negroes, you must remember that argument has no effect upon them. They can only be influenced by their fears, superstitions, and cupidity. Do not attempt to flatter and persuade them. Treat them as to show them you are the superior race, and that their natural position is that of subordination to the white man. Never threaten a man individually. If he deserves to be threatened, the necessities of the time require that he should die. What the heck? 1866. The Republican Party passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to protect the rights of newly freed slaves, while the Democratic Party treats newly freed slaves like second-class citizens. Blacks outnumbered white voters in the South, and Democrats hated that. They hated it so much that they attacked the Republican convention and killed 40 blacks, 20 whites, and wounded 150 people. This is why the KKK was founded, to combat the blacks being elected and outnumbering white Democrat voters. Blacks elected in the 1860s. Yeah, that's right. July 4th, 1867. The Republican Party of Texas was founded. This is the same Texas that Democrats refer to now as the good old boy racist white people Texas. Well, the Republican Party of Texas was founded by 150 blacks and 20 whites. Blacks also founded Republican parties in other states in the South. One more time, I said in the South. The first 42 blacks elected in state legislature were all Republicans. Louisiana's first 95 black representatives and first 32 black senators were all Republican. Alabama's first 103 blacks elected were all Republicans. Mississippi's first blacks elected were all Republicans. South Carolina's first 190 blacks elected were all Republicans. Virginia's first 46 blacks were all Republicans. Florida's first 30 blacks elected were all Republican. North Carolina's first 30 blacks were all Republican. Georgia's first 41 blacks elected were all Republicans. This is one heck of a history lesson. This is also one heck of a present lesson, because we can see what actually happened in our history and see that these sellout jokers in the present are lying to us, which means we don't listen to them in the future. 1868, the 14th Amendment passes and recognizes newly freed slaves as U.S. citizens. The Republican Party supported 94%. Democratic Party supported 0%. No Democrats from the House, no Democrats from the Senate voted for it. 1870. The 15th Amendment passes and secures the right to vote to newly freed slaves. The Republican Party supported it 100%. The Democratic Party supported it 0%. There was no support. Also, since the 15th Amendment, 1870, to the Constitution abolished slavery, Democrats had to find another way to maintain the white supremacy system. So they used black codes. These were laws passed in southern states which had the intent and the effect of restricting blacks' freedom and of compelling them to work in a labor economy based on low wages or debt. Slavery without a chain, pretty much. Some states made it illegal for blacks to own weapons. Remember, corrupt government don't like armed citizens. And barred them from owning land because poor people are easier to control and keep down. Democrats have used black codes before the Civil War too. We can see in Indiana. Article 13 of Indiana's 1851 Constitution stated, "No Negro or mulatto shall come into or settle in the state after the adoption of this Constitution." The Illinois Black Code of 1853 prohibited any black persons from outside of the state from staying in the state for more than 10 days, subjecting black persons who remained beyond the 10 days to arrest, detention, a $50 fine, which was a lot back then, or deportation. And black codes also barred interracial marriage. Let's look at the Mississippi black codes. Be it enacted that no freed man, free Negro, or mulatto, not in the military service of the United States government, and not licensed so to do by the board of police of his or her county, shall keep or carry firearms of any kind, or any ammunition, dirk or bowie knife, and on conviction thereof in the county court shall be punished by fine, not exceeding $10, and pay the cost of such proceedings, and all such arms or ammunition shall be forfeited to the informer. And it shall be the duty of every civil and military officer to arrest any freed man, free Negro, or mulatto found with any such arms or ammunition, and cause him or her to be committed to trial and default of bail. All freed men, free Negroes, and mulattoes in this state over the age of 18 years old found on the second Monday in January 1866 or thereafter, with no lawful employment or business, or found unlawfully assembling themselves together either in the day or night time, and all white persons so assembling themselves with freed men, free Negroes, or mulattoes, or usually associating with freed men, free Negroes, or mulattoes, on terms of equality, or living in adultery or fornication with freed women, free Negro or mulatto, shall be deemed vagrants, and on conviction thereof shall be fined in a sum not exceeding, in a case of free man, free Negro, or mulatto, $50, and a white man, $200, and imprisoned at the discretion of the court, the free Negro not exceeding 10 days, and the white man not exceeding 6 months. The Reconstruction Amendments were created to stop these. 1871. Republican Party passes the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which is the anti-KKK Act. The North and South Democrats didn't want this passed. 1874. Representative James T. Rapier, Republican from Alabama, said in a speech, "Democrats were hunting me down as the partridge on the mount night and day with their Ku Klux Klan simply because I was a Republican and refused to bow at the foot of their bayout." 1875. The Civil Rights Act of 1875 passes. It is the first anti-discrimination law in America. Republicans support 99%. Democratic Party supported 0%. And 1876. The year the momentum stopped. Democrats gained control of the Senate. And as a result, the civil rights movement was squashed, with no civil rights bills being passed for 85 years. They also barred blacks from federal office for 70 years. They worked to reverse all the civil rights laws that were passed earlier. They did this using Jim Crow laws. Yes, these are the same Jim Crow laws Martin Luther King fought against. And what are Jim Crow laws? Well, here are some examples. Nurses. No person or corporation shall require any white female nurse to nurse in wards or rooms in hospitals, either public or private, in which Negro men are placed. That was in Alabama. Buses. All passenger stations in this state operated by any motor transportation company shall have separate waiting rooms or space and separate ticket windows for the white and colored races. That was in Alabama again. You see, it was the Democrats who tried to get Rosa to go to the back of the bus. But see, now they want to act like they all honor her. Intermarriage. The marriage of a person of Caucasian blood with a Negro, Mongolian, Malay, or Hindu shall be null and void. That was in Arizona. Cohabitation. Any Negro man and white woman, or any white man and Negro woman who are not married to each other, who shall habitually live in and occupy in the nighttime the same room, shall be punished by imprisonment not exceeding 12 months or by fine not exceeding $500. That was in Florida. Education. The schools for white children and the schools for Negro children shall be conducted separately. That was in Florida. Barbers. No colored barber shall serve as a barber to white women or girls. That was in Georgia. Burial. The officer in charge shall not bury or allow to be buried any colored persons upon ground set apart or used for the burial of white persons. That's in Georgia. Restaurants. All persons licensed to conduct a restaurant shall serve either white people exclusively or colored people exclusively, and shall not sell to two races within the same room or serve two races anywhere under the same license. Georgia. Prisons. The warden shall see that the white convicts shall have separate apartments for both eating and sleeping from the Negro convicts. That's Mississippi. And then it goes so on and so on and so on. So we see it was the dang Democrats who brought about this whites only, coloreds only garbage. And these are just a few of them. In the 1890s, Democrats enacted literacy tests that asked ridiculous, confusing questions. And if you didn't pass, you couldn't vote. Poll taxes, which blacks and poor whites couldn't afford, so they weren't allowed to vote. Elaborate registration systems and whites-only Democrat Party primaries called white primaries to exclude black voters. Ain't it crazy that the people claiming that they're all about democracy are the original perpetrators of voter suppression? And that voter suppression worked. 1882, in Mississippi, there were 70,000 more blacks than whites, but the white voters outnumbered black voters 8-1. In Birmingham, Alabama, out of 18,000 of the blacks there, only 30 were allowed to vote. In Texas, the number of black voters fell from 100,000 to 5,000. Alabama and Florida black voters dropped 90%. By the 1940s, only 5% of blacks were registered to vote. In Selma, 1965, blacks outnumbered whites, but in voters, it was 99% white, 1% black. This is the first major step on how they were able to convert black voters into Democrats. They chopped down the number of black Republican voters through the intimidation of the KKK, saying, vote Democrat or die. Then brought in the literacy test, poll taxes, and other regulations to drastically reduce the amount of eligible black voters. For example, in Birmingham, out of 18,000 blacks, only 30 were allowed to vote. Then take the small amount of black voters remaining and convert them to Democrat voters. The kids of these will grow up as Democrats, and the grandkids of those will grow up as Democrats, not really understanding the true history of what happened. 1900. Democrats tried to repeal the 14th and 15th Amendment. Remember, the 14th Amendment recognized free slaves as U.S. citizens, and the 15th Amendment secures the right to vote to newly freed slaves. Let's see what Democrat U.S. Senator Ben Tillman says. We made up our minds that the 14th and 15th Amendment to the Constitution were themselves null and void, that the Civil Rights Act of Congress were null and void, that oaths required by such laws were null and void. 1914, Democrat President Woodrow Wilson segregates the federal government and the U.S. military. Wilson was also a former KKK member. 1915, the Democratic President Woodrow Wilson shows the first movie ever shown in the White House, and it was a KKK movie. Here's a quote from it. "The organization that saved the South from the anarchy of black rule, but not without the shedding of more blood than at Gettysburg." 1922, Republican Leonidas Dyer passes the first anti-lynching law through the House of Representatives. 119 members voted against the bill. 16 were Republicans. 103 were Democrats. 1957, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower passes the first civil rights law in 82 years. With the Civil Rights Act of 1957, Democrats, of course, filibustered a bill, delayed the process in attempt to block it. Republican Party supported 92%. Democrats supported 54%. 1960, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower passes the Civil Rights Act of 1960. Democrats filibuster this bill too. Republicans support 93% and Democrats support 68%. 1964. Civil Rights Act of 1964 was introduced. It outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It ended unequal application of voter registration requirements and racial segregation in schools, at the workplace, and by facilities that serve the general public. It was presented to Senate and was opposed and filibustered by Democratic Senator Robert Byrd, who also was a former KKK member. It passed thanks to Republican Minority Leader Everett M. Dirksen, who also wrote the language of the bill. Everett also voted for the anti-poll tax and anti-lynching measures. That same act was signed into law by Democrat President Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, Lyndon B. Johnson was the vice president to John F. Kennedy. And as we remember, John F. Kennedy was killed by the government, so Lyndon became president. Lyndon opposed every civil rights bill for 20 years straight. Here's a quote from him. "I have voted against the so-called poll tax repeal bill. I have voted against the so-called anti-lynching bill." So why would this man sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Well, let's look at his quotes. This will show you his mentality. These Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us since they've got something now that they've never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. That was Lyndon B. Johnson. And when explaining why the Civil Rights Bill was important to him, he said, "I'll have those N-words voting Democratic for the next 200 years. Again, that was Lyndon B. Johnson. Let that sink in. To fully understand what is happening here, you must understand the time. The 60s were a time of social revolution. Many people were waking up to the corruption, which brought the counterculture of the 1960s. The racist ways of the Democratic Party could not exist in this era without being shunned and fought by the masses. We had leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, both born in the 1920s, by the way, who were able to connect and effectively expose to the new generation how stupid racism is. Lyndon Johnson, the guy who opposed every civil rights bill for 20 years straight and was born in 1908, understood this. Democrats knew this was the opportunity they had to take the black vote. I'll break that down after this. It's time for everybody to know who this Lyndon B. Johnson character really is. In the 1964 election, we had Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson versus GOP nominee Republican Barry Goldwater. Goldwater was the Ron Paul of his time in that he was for the Constitution and was hated by the media because he was anti-establishment. During the Republican primaries, he went against pro-establishment. That means pro-Federal Reserve candidates like Nelson Rockefeller and George Romney. The media tried its best to discredit him, but because of the anti-establishment culture of the 1960s, his grassroots campaign surpassed that. Goldwater was against the Federal Reserve. Here's his quotes. "Most Americans have no real understanding of the operations of the international money lenders. The accounts of the Federal Reserve have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States." That's Barry Goldwater. He was also great friends with JFK, and they planned to fly around the country together and run a joint platform to have real debates so the public can make a clear choice in the 64 election. As we know, that wasn't the case with Kennedy dead. So Goldwater went against Lyndon, and the agreement of a joint campaign or debates for the people was thrown out the window by Johnson. Not only that, but there were no debates at all in the 1964 election simply because Lyndon Johnson didn't want to debate. Of course, the establishment loved that. So how did the people decide who they would vote for? It was through campaign ads. And Lyndon was the dirtiest player in the game. An example is he ran an ad of a little girl counting flowers. And as she counts the flowers in the dramatic scene, an atomic bomb blows up the girl. Then it says, vote Lyndon B. Johnson. Pretty much because we don't want this to happen, even though Goldwater was against the war. Here is the key deceptive tactic Lyndon used that is not most known. He created an ad where it has the KKK saying they support Goldwater for president. Then at the end says, vote Lyndon for president. That shows you the mentality of Democrats. This is the new way the Democrats and the terrorist arm of the Democratic Party, KKK, took control of the black vote. And they've been using this tactic ever since. That's why Democrats always bring up race. Black minister and Senator Richard Kane of South Carolina predicted this in the 1870s, saying, the bad blood of the South comes because the Negroes are Republican. If they would only cease to be Republicans and vote the straight out Democratic ticket, there would be no trouble. Then the bad blood would just sink entirely out of sight. How did Democrats get away with painting Goldwater as a racist? That's because Goldwater opposed the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 because he saw things in the bill that were unconstitutional, talking about Titles 2 and 7. They hid that Goldwater was not a racist and supported the Civil Rights Bills of 1957 and 1960. And he was opposed to discrimination or segregation on the basis of race, color, creed, or any other basis. These deceptive Democrats get all the credit by major media for getting rid of Jim Crow. But let's not forget history. There was a civil rights movement in the 1860s that was gaining so much momentum. We got the Civil Rights Act of 1866, 14th Amendment to the Constitution, 15th Amendment to the Constitution, Civil Rights Act of 1871, that was the Anti-KKK Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1875, all passed by Republicans and fought against by Democrats, only for Democrats to gain control of Congress in 1876 and squash the Civil Rights Movement, with no more civil rights laws being passed for 85 years. They are the ones who brought the Jim Crow laws because they couldn't get rid of the 14th and 15th Amendment. This is the party that terrorized blacks for over 100 years straight. They are the only political party in history to repeatedly murder black people. Lyndon B. Johnson, remember, said, I'll have those N-words voting Democratic for the next 200 years. And what they do? Give us a janky old sellout for the banks, Barack Obama. Trying to change the history books by having the first black president be a Democrat. I think it would be more accurate if he had a KKK hat. And I'm still not through with Lyndon. He was the one acting like he wasn't going to escalate the war, but as soon as he got back in office, he did exactly that. It's even worse because he let the bankers convince him to stage the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The official story was that the North Vietnamese torpedo boats launched an unprovoked attack against a U.S. destroyer boat that was on routine patrol in the Tonkin Gulf on August the 2nd, 1964. And that the North Vietnamese boats followed up with a deliberate attack on a pair of U.S. ships 2 days later, August 4th. But the lie detector test determined that was a lie. Here's the truth. First of all, the U.S. Maddox was not on a routine patrol. It was engaged in aggressive intelligence gathering maneuvers, working with coordinated attacks on North Vietnam by the South Vietnamese Navy and the Laotian Air Force. This was a part of Operation Plan 34A, aka O Plan 34 Alpha, that was approved by Johnson in the summer of '64. It was CIA-run covert operations using South Vietnamese commandos and speedboats to harass radar sites along the coastline of North Vietnam. On August 1st, South Vietnamese raiders struck at 2 targets on the North Vietnamese coast, and the Laotian Air Force bombed infiltration routes along their border. They were provoking North Vietnam to attack the U.S. Navy, which supported this operation in hopes that they could use this as an excuse to escalate the war. August 2nd, 1964, 3 North Vietnam boats attacked the USS Maddox. Maddox fired back, and 4 North Vietnamese sailors were said to have been killed. With 6 more wounded, there were no U.S. casualties. The second Gulf of Tonkin incident on August 4th, 1964, that said the Maddox was attacked never happened. And that's admitted by former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, even though he originally testified that there was unequivocal proof of an unprovoked second attack against the USS Maddox. So the United States was looking like idiots, maneuvering around, dodging nobody, and had a 2-hour shootout with nobody. Then you get the Washington Post saying, American planes hit North Vietnam after second attack on our destroyers. Move taken to halt new aggression. What move? Lyndon B. Johnson came out with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution as a retaliation to a fake attack. Y'all better understand this. The resolution escalated the Vietnam War, which resulted in 58,000 dead Americans and 3 million dead Vietnamese. The New York Times said Lyndon went to the American people last night with the somber facts. The Los Angeles Times told Americans to face the facts that the communists, by their attack on American vessels in international waters, have themselves escalated the hostilities. Both parties voted for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. That's right. The 88th Congress of the United States was full of crap, just like the current Congress. Only 2 senators voted against it, and this is 100% proof that both parties work against the interests of the public. People were drafted into this war over a fake event. And you see these sellout politicians and media played right along with it. Lyndon got the country all riled up like we had to respond, but then says later in 65, for all I know, our Navy was shooting at whales out there. Oh, this is the type of stuff this government does. See, they tried to get JFK to do Northwoods, but he rejected it. Understand, the presidential spot is a puppet position. They only allow people to get that spot if they feel they can completely control them. For example, Hillary Clinton. Lyndon was a rollover sellout. What was Operation Northwoods? Operation Northwoods was a plan to create fake attacks on friendly defected Cubans, U.S. military bases, and U.S. citizens, all designed to appear conducted by Cuba. Let's take a deeper look at what they wanted JFK to do with Northwoods. This information is declassified. You do your own research, you will be shown that. Page 8 of 15-page George Washington University file on Operation Northwoods, page 5 of Pentagon report. This plan should be developed to focus all efforts on a specific ultimate objective, which would provide adequate justification for U.S. military intervention. Such a plan would enable a logical buildup of incidents to be combined with other seemingly unrelated events to camouflage the ultimate objective. I think I've seen this before. Pages 10 through 11 of 15-page George Washington University file on Northwoods, page 7 and 8 of Joint Chief Reports. A series of well-coordinated incidents will be planned to take place in around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by hostile Cuban forces. A. Incidents to establish a credible attack. Start rumors, many. Use clandestine radio. 2. Land friendly Cubans in uniform over the fence to stage attack on base. 3. Capture Cuban-friendly saboteurs inside the base. 4. Start riots near the base main gate. Friendly Cubans. 5. Blow up ammunition inside the base. Start fires. 6. Burn aircraft on airbase. Sabotage. 7. Lob mortar shells from outside of base into base. 8. Capture assault teams approaching from the sea or vicinity of Guantanamo City. 9. Capture militia groups which storms base. 10. Sabotage ship in harbor, large fires, naphthalene. 11. Sink ships near harbor entrance. Conduct funerals for mock victims. Did you hear what I just said? Mock victims. How low can you go? This is what this government does to convince you to follow their agenda. It's all about you. They need you to create their new world order. And don't be naive and think they still don't do stuff like that. We have better technology and they have a lot of practice. So in this day and age, you should be alert. The news isn't going to tell you, hey, this is fake, just so you know. No, they're going to sell the lie. Let's jump back on the timeline. 1966, the FBI created Kwanzaa to further the divide between blacks and whites. Remember, division is how they maintain power. 1968 and 1972. What happened here? This is when Republican Richard Nixon started the Southern Strategy. The Southern Strategy was a plan for Republicans to become the party for racist Southern white people. This was in response to the Democrats finally taking over the black vote after all the killing, intimidation, and deception. Remember, Democrat President Lyndon B. Johnson said, I'll have them ends voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Since blacks are voting Democrat for such a long time, they knew racist whites wouldn't want to be in the same party. So Republicans ran campaigns in ways that would attract the white racists without being too obvious. The plan was to ignore black voters and nominate candidates who would appeal to white people only. They still do that to this day. For example, John McCain and Mitt Romney, who both can't connect with minority voters. You would think they would want a candidate who would be able to connect with everybody, but that's not the aim. The aim is division. The Republican Party has an air of racism to get those racist white voters. Democrats understand Republicans are doing the Southern Strategy. That's why they always over-eagerly state how much they care about black people every given chance. Only so they can be the contrast of the Republican Party and try to erase history and get you invested in the system. Again, the Southern Strategy is why Republicans come off as the dumb, out-of-touch, closed-minded, racist Christians. It is deliberate to maintain the left-right paradigm. For example, Bill O'Reilly. When white racists hear him speak, it fuels their racism. When Democrats hear him speak, they become more Democrat. Before we move on, I'm giving a special shout out to the Quakers who were against slavery even way back in 1688. Before these dumb political parties, that's right, there's more to Quakers than the oatmeal box. So Democrats took the black vote by deception. Democrats did the same thing with women's rights, and they snatched that up in the 1960s as well. As we see it now, Democrats are supposed to be the reasonable ones, caring for the rights of women, and Republicans are supposed to be the out-of-touch, ignorant Christians who are against women's rights. All this phony crap. But who are the originals? 3 names. Lucretia Mott, who was an American Quaker, abolitionist, women's rights activist, and social reformer. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, considered to be the greatest speaker of the early women's rights movement, and her friend, Susan B. Anthony, born into Quaker family, fought against slavery since the age of 17. 1856, she became New York State agent for the American Anti-Slavery Society and played a pivotal role in the women's suffrage movement. It is very rare that you hear a Democrat mention Susan B. Anthony. Why? Because Democrats were the ones against women's rights. A warrant for Susan B. Anthony's arrest was issued on November 14th, 1872, after a Democratic poll watcher named Sylvester Lewis filed a complaint. November 18th, 1872, Susan B. Anthony was arrested for voting after boasting to Elizabeth Cady Stanton that she voted for the Republican ticket straight. At the request of Susan B. Anthony, Senator A.A. Sargent, a Republican from California, introduced the 19th Amendment in 1878, also known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, that prohibits any United States citizen from being denied the right to vote on the basis of sex. Now that you know some history, what should we know about 1878? Well, in 1876, Democrats still took over Congress. So every time the 19th Amendment was introduced, it was shot down by the Democratic-controlled Senate. It was shot down not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 times by Democrats. It didn't pass until 41 years later in 1919. When the amendment was submitted to the states, 26 out of the 36 states that ratified it had Republican legislators. Of the 9 states that voted against ratification, 8 were Democratic. 12 states, all Republican, had given women full suffrage before it was ratified. On August 18, 1920, Tennessee, being the 36th and final state, needed to ratify the amendment. U.S. Secretary of State certified the amendment on August 26, 1920. Do you see the pattern? Democrats fought against and tortured blacks. Now they want to change history by having the first black president be Democrat. Democrats fought against women's rights. Now all of a sudden they want to throw up Hillary Clinton, trying to change history as if Democrats are truly for women. Let's examine the 1960s again. This is the time where you can actually pinpoint where the culture of the masses changed. A deliberate, sinister change. The women's liberation movement was portrayed to be women fighting for the right to work and get equal pay with men, fighting to be treated equally. It's known as second wave feminism.
Let me guess, you're gonna tell us what it was really about.
You doggone right. The Rockefellers funded the women's liberation movement. Admitted by Nicholas Rockefeller, it was for two primary reasons. One, they couldn't tax half of the population because they weren't working. We're talking about stay-at-home moms. Two, the kids now go to school at an earlier age and they get indoctrinated by the government. They will be told how and what to think, which breaks up the family. The children will look up to the government as their family. Who funded the General Education Board in 1902? John D. Rockefeller. It's a huge red flag right there. The key propped up women's lib leader they used was Gloria Steinem. She was a CIA asset. She admitted that. The popular feminist magazine called Miss Magazine was also funded by the CIA. The feminist movement trained women to think being married and being a stay-at-home mom was old-fashioned and oppressive. To bring in a new world order, they have to break the family unit because the new world order is a collective way of thinking backed by the government. A strong family unit stands in their way because it will produce individuals who won't be fooled as easy. They will trust their family before the government. A lot of y'all know something changed about marriage, but you can't really pinpoint what happened. Marriage was between the masculine man being the provider and protector and the feminine woman being submissive and nurturing. We need to remember that for a woman, love is an instinctive act of self-sacrifice. She gives herself to her husband and children and is fulfilled by seeing them thrive and receiving their love, respect, and gratitude. A woman makes this supreme sacrifice to only one man who will cherish her and provide for his family. Men instinctively want to fulfill this responsibility. That's a quote from Henry McCall, PhD. This is the real women power. Both work together as a loving team to fulfill the needs of themselves and their children. To raise children, both sides are needed because there is a man way to raising a child and a woman way. They both complement each other. Each brings what the other can't. But the feminist movement working with the media is here to break that, and they actually broke that already. The messages the media sends are, number one, men can no longer be trusted. Just watch Lifetime, you'll see that. Men are unfaithful rats and dishonest, abusive monsters. Number two, women are victims by virtue of their sex. Because we are women, we remain victims in our private lives, at work, in society as a whole. Number three, women should be selfish. Leisure now means time for yourself spent alone or perhaps with one's girlfriends, but definitely without spouse and kids. The endless articles preach the new feminist gospel that indulging yourself is an important part of being a healthy, well-adjusted woman. Number four, sex is not reserved for love and marriage. Magazines like Glamour and Cosmopolitan urge young women to put out on their first date, ogle men openly, and be an athlete in bed. There is no discussion of marriage or family. Number five, self-fulfillment lies in career success and not husband and family. The social rewards of holding down a job are critical to one's sense of dignity and self-worth. Let's look at the effects. If you didn't know, marriage reduces child poverty. The poverty rate for single parents with children in the United States in 2009 was 37.1%. The rate for married couples with children was 6.8%. Being raised in a married family reduces a child's probability of living in poverty by about 82%. The Illuminati bankers desire a poor population because they are easy to control. As we see in this chart from 1929 to 2010, we see exactly what I told you. The marriage rate greatly declines after the 60s. We also see in this chart is around the time when the out-of-wedlock childbirth started to rise. This was because of the engineered discrediting of marriage. The mentality of women is, I don't need a man, which if she didn't need a man, the man felt he didn't have to stick around and raise a family. This is why a lot of y'all don't have a father right now. Birth control pills, which was founded by the Rockefellers, encouraged sex before marriage, which reinforced what the CIA created culture said when putting out the message, sex is not reserved for love and marriage. This was the culture that brought us the runaway dads and the oh so popular single mothers talking about, I'm an independent lady. I could do it all on my own, see? No, you do it all on your own because you have to. And to the majority of these single parent situations, you struggling and all you do is work. No time to raise the kids. Clock in, clock out, come back home tired. See the kids for a little while. Then send them off to daycare. Then send them off to school and then let the state teach them. While you teach them, the only thing that matters is money. There was a time when the family unit mattered instead of just making money. There was a time, women, when you didn't have to work some job. You didn't have to be in the rat race that is the workforce. Feminism came on the scene acting like they were here to provide a choice. But now you pretty much don't have a choice. The culture has changed. The men have changed. Their mentality as a whole is not to be a provider for their wife. The women have changed with their mentality of, I'm not going to let some man be the only one making money, leaving me at home to do the dishes. Y'all got so manipulated that you can't see the benefit of the true nature of marriage. Man works outside to bring money inside. And woman stays at home, works inside. It was all about the inside, the home. It makes life easier for both. When a man has a day off, they are both home. The home duties like laundry, cleaning, and cooking, setting appointments, etc. are all done so you can both spend time with each other instead of scrambling to do them after work or on the weekends or on your day off. This new way of doing things is designed to break up your marriage. When a man and woman is working, when do they have time for each other? They can only hope to schedule their vacations at the same time. That's if they get one. Also, when they both work and come home from work, they are tired and don't want to be bothered. This is all key information so you can understand what's happening now. So we see the CIA created the counterculture that destroyed the gender roles in the family unit. Now they are taking it to the next level by redefining gender roles. This is why Caitlyn Jenner is the media darling. He said that this is the new normal, and the media wants you to believe, embrace, and even put into action these beliefs. Taking the masculinity out of men. Democrats haven't changed. They are doing a subliminal racism with the carefree black boy movement. In this movement, you can see young black boys like Jaden Smith wearing dresses with flowers in his head. Understand, the carefree black boy will grow up into the carefree black man. You see how effective their plan was from the 60s? Now they are putting the finishing touches. As a military strategy, you take down the man. You can then take down the nation. You're programmed to think I'm closed-minded, but in reality, I just understand the agenda. And to understand the mentality of this shadow government, just look at when they tried to create the gay bomb. That bomb would have been used to make enemy forces gay. This proves that they feel making men feminine will help them win a war. Changing gender roles is no different and is a part of their end game. We see a divide and conquer game. The division is a distraction. Man versus woman, rich versus poor, white versus black. Let's look at Ferguson, Black Lives Matter. Did you know that there was somebody behind those protests? The whole hands up, don't shoot movement? Council of Foreign Relations billionaire George Soros funded them, spending $33 million. Now, why would he be funding it? Because he knows it will continue to divide between the races. Then it comes out that Mike Brown didn't even have his hands up. Yet I'm seeing protests all around the world of people putting their hands up. Y'all need to understand, all ain't what it seems. They put provocateurs in those protests to provoke the police to cause more chaos so the government can bring in the National Guard and have martial law. They hope for mob mentality to take over and more to do the same. For the government, this is an ideal situation because their new world order comes from order out of chaos. I understand the injustice and the evils of the largest gang in America, the police force, is deeper than that. I also understand that there are those who will purposely sell out and provoke you to bring martial law upon yourselves. This is why you see them wearing "I Can Breathe" shirts after Eric Garner was killed. That's the man who was choked to death by cops for selling loose cigarettes. See, when martial law comes, they feel like they are immune. I believe in protesting, but from what I've been seeing, your protest ain't good enough. It's not effective if you always end up in a negative light. If your protest is against the cops, then you should be having a protest that don't need the cops. You're only making them look good. Be having curfews and military helicopters flying all around your area. And what the heck is going on with Baltimore? A man dies and y'all first reaction is to run to the stove and steal toilet tissue. What is really going on here? This joker got toilet paper and a smile on his face. Excuse me, sir. Are you protesting for Freddie Gray? This has to be the most elaborate toilet paper commercial I have ever seen. And why you gotta have the tongue out? Why are we waving the paper in the air? This man taking selfies with the toilet paper. And oh no, look at the little boy taking the UPS truck. Joker here with the Michael Jackson pose, surrounded by fire and destruction. I'm tired of hearing people making excuses for jokers tearing down the city, burning up cars, fighting in the streets, saying, oh, you must think a car is more important than a life. No, Joker. You must think burning down a car is more important than more innocent lives getting killed. I see emotion and no logic. Did you forget Hurricane Katrina? Blackwater private mercenaries were sent into the streets of New Orleans with a $73 million contract. They aren't given the same rules as cops and soldiers. They've been known to kill and run over civilians for fun over in Iraq. These are the type of people who were deputized by the governor in New Orleans. These private mercenaries have still been funded under the Bush and Obama administration. They are a private army for the private banks. And when things get too crazy, that's the excuse to bring them in, and we can't give them that. I don't want any more innocent people dying. See, the FBI infiltrated the Black Panther Party in the 1960s through COINTELPRO. And all of y'all talking about violence is the real action don't understand the full nature of the agenda. You only see white versus black, which is a paradigm in itself. This is why they use race, because you get caught up emotionally and will never see how you are getting played. When they infiltrated the Black Panther Party in the 1960s, they incited violence. But why violence? Because violence helps their New World Order agenda get passed. In the 60s, Black Panthers were speaking up against the police brutality on blacks in Oakland. Sound familiar? FBI informant Richard Aoki infiltrates the Black Panthers and gives them firearms and weapons training. They end up having shootouts with Oakland police, and Black Panthers end up being killed. Fast forward and you look at Ferguson and you see the new Black Panther Party agitating the Mike Brown situation with plots to blow up the St. Louis Arch and kill the police. And even how they throw things at the cops to provoke them to attack the rest of the protesters. This is how the peaceful protesters get framed. They use violence to discredit the whole cause. And when the cops start arresting protesters, the general public will say, they had it coming, instead of, this should not be happening to those protesters who are standing up for what's right. The government wants the violence so they can use it against you. And remember, I showed you, George Soros had paid protesters in Ferguson. I bet you didn't even know those paid protesters also showed up in Baltimore and McKinney. And what the heck, Black Lives Matter? You doggone right. But you see a lot of black people saying this, but where they at though? Where they at though? The abortion clinic. January 2nd, 1923, the first legal birth control clinic opens in the U.S. called the Clinical Research Bureau. It was funded by the Rockefeller family and opened by Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was created to initiate the Negro Project. The objective of the project was to infiltrate the black community by presenting birth control as a health option for women to kill off the black race. Killed them off by limiting the growth of the population by abortion and sterilization. Here's a quote from her.
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members.
That's Margaret Sanger. This is why they gave Martin Luther King a Planned Parenthood award, even though he wasn't for abortion.
Slavs, Latin, and Hebrew immigrants are human weeds, a dead weight of human waste. Black soldiers and Jews are a menace to race.
That's Margaret Sanger.
The most merciful thing that a family does to one of its infant members is to kill it.
That's Margaret Sanger.
Knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. It's general, though prudent. Practice must lead to a higher individuality and ultimately to a cleaner race. Birth control is nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of preventing the birth of defectives or of those who will become defective.
That's Margaret Sanger. This is what Planned Parenthood is all about. Look at this racist joker Margaret Sanger talking to the KKK. Be careful who you support. Hillary Clinton said she admires Margaret Sanger enormously for her courage, tenacity, and her vision. Well, we know her vision. Of course, we can't forget Obama. This is why your birth control is free under Obamacare. That's right. Democrats still getting black people killed. Now, you would like to just say everything I'm saying is just some stupid conspiracy theory. Too bad I don't do conspiracy theories. It is exactly what I've shown you it is. Blacks comprise of only 13% of the population of America, but account for 37% of all abortions. Black women are 5 times more likely to abort than white women. Planned Parenthood, the largest seller of abortions in the United States, has located 80% of its abortion clinics in minority neighborhoods, disproportionately targeting minorities for abortion. Since 1973, black women have had 16 million abortions. In New York City, there were 56,000 black pregnancies in 2012. Of that total, 31,000 were aborted. That figure represents almost 50% of all abortions in New York City, despite the fact blacks represent less than 15% of the population. So clearly the plan of the racist baby-hating founder Margaret Sanger is working. This is why Planned Parenthood was created. Who has the pro-abortion stance? The Democrats. They always promoting abortion with some story of young women getting raped, and now her life is over. Let's get real here. 93% of the abortions worldwide are for social reason. Rape and incest are only 1%. They're still writing off to the 1960s CIA created feminist culture to appear like they're for women, talking about how they are for women. But when you look at what's happening, more baby girls die from abortion than boys. Do we forget that those girls grow up and become women? Don't get it confused. This is not just about black people. Do we forget that there is a depopulation agenda at hand? The founder of CNN, Ted Turner, said a total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels, would be ideal. Henry Kissinger said depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world, because the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed countries. Henry Kissinger again, the world's population needs to be reduced by 50%, and the elderly are useless eaters. What the heck? And that's just not some Harry off the street. Henry Kissinger is one of those Illuminati jokers. Former Secretary of State under Nixon. Let's look at other things both parties are supposed to fight against each other for. Democrats are supposed to be for gun control. Republicans are supposed to be pro-Second Amendment. First of all, that's a big joke. Democrats should be the last ones talking about gun control because they were the ones putting guns to the heads of black people, telling them to vote Democrat. Remember, they passed the black codes to block blacks from owning guns. And if you look at it today, the black codes are still having an effect, and that they tricked blacks into becoming Democrats. Democrats have the anti-gun stance, which would make blacks not want to own guns. The reason we have the Second Amendment right to bear arms is to protect us from a tyrannical government. The people who want a tyrannical government are the people pushing for gun control. Those people are the ones behind the Federal Reserve and control both parties. So Republicans are just putting on a show to keep you invested in the lie. Look at how you got hoodwinked into Obamacare. You see the Republicans and Democrats arguing over it, but how did you accept it? They told you we need to go against the big bad insurance companies. The big bad insurance companies are making it hard for everybody with these prices and rules. So they proposed this universal health care plan that would eliminate that. The problem is that they allow the big bad insurance companies to co-write the bill. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, remember, that's how the Federal Reserve was created. You can throw any other topic up that they are supposed to be against, and you'll find that it's just a big distraction from what's really going on. Republicans are supposed to be the pro-war, anti-terror, pro-NSA, pro-TSA party. You would have seen that under Republican Bush. And the Democrats protested against the wars, the Patriot Act, TSA, and all these things. But under Obama, they flat out accepted it. This is how they get people to accept their New World Order agenda. It's incremental. If you don't support it under a Republican term, you will support it under a Democrat term, and vice versa. This is how the agenda advances. They can't be too obvious and pull the whole agenda at one time. You're too distracted in the tribal, I want my team to win zone, that you can't even see something as simple as, I was against the wars under Bush, why am I not against the wars under Obama? Let's not forget, the older Republicans did bad this time, let's vote Democrat next time. Then the Democrat does bad, so let's vote Republican next time. America will always lose with Democrats and Republicans. You think it doesn't affect you, but it does. The whole society is molded by these two parties. The masses are given a template of what to think and believe in from the stances of the two parties. For example, When Democrats put Jim Crow in place, it enabled and strengthened racism on a everyday level. Segregated bus stops, bathrooms, water fountains, etc. was a constant reminder of division. And the people acted accordingly with hate towards each other because of this mandated division. Division is the name of the game. This is how the private bankers maintain control and advance their agenda. The way they maintain power is by giving you the illusion of choice. While you fight over the illusion, they get a lot done. There's only one way to end this video. Remember who collapsed the economy. Remember why we had or will have an economic world collapse. Whether you're watching this before it happens, whether you're watching it while it's happening, whether you're watching it after it happens. This is the key point to understand. And understand, the government will not save you. They're the ones that did it. And you're over here putting all your trust in this left-right paradigm, left versus right, when they are planning sinister things such as this, hurting you and your families just so they can pose as the saviors and offer some solution that they already have made up before it even happens. Understand that gold and silver can preserve the value of your money. Understand the more money they print, the less value it has. Understand it took 224 years to get $5.6 trillion in debt in America. But yet it took 16 years under Obama and Bush to more than double that with the $18.1 trillion in debt. That's $12.5 trillion in 16 years. Understand, let's not look at those puppets, Obama and Bush. They are just scapegoats. You keep looking at the puppets. Look at the puppet masters. This is the plan. This is the design. It already happened. In Germany, 1923, hyperinflation during the Weimar Republic resulted in the price of a loaf of bread reaching 3 billion marks. What? Look at 1914. The US dollar was 4.2 German marks to $1. And we see in 1923, it took 4.2 trillion marks to equal $1. They are planning for something like this to happen worldwide, to bring you to your knees so that you accept their new world order. This will give them more control. Now, why would we give people who are doing things like this to us more control? It doesn't make any sense. Let's look at Damian McBride. He's telling you, former Gordon Brown advisor, look what he's saying. People should stock up on canned food and bottled water. Let's look at it now. They telling you, advice on the looming crash. Get hard cash in a safe place. Don't assume banks and cash points will be open or bank cards will work. That's your warning. Crash advice 2. Do you have enough bottled water, tinned goods, and other essentials at home to live a month indoors? If not, get shopping. Crash advice 3. Agree a rally point with your loved ones in case transport and communication gets cut off. Somewhere you can all head to. They even warning you. But you ain't gonna listen. They know that. But I guess they feel better that they at least warned you. But what you want to do? Call people crazy. People are preppers. They're just crazy. Now those people are smart. So you want to say I'm crazy for talking about this right now? But everybody's going to be talking about this in a little while. So we got Gordon Brown's former advisor. Who is Gordon Brown? This man right here. Prime Minister Gordon Brown, former. And this is what happened with the last collapse. But this one's going to be way worse than this. But look at what he said. Look at the mentality. Gordon Brown calls for New World Order to beat the recession. Just like I told you. Mr. Brown will call on fellow world leaders to use the current worldwide economic downturn as an opportunity to thoroughly reform international financial institutions and create a new, truly global society with Britain, the U.S., and Europe providing leadership. Now, this was from way back November 2008. But you better believe the game has not changed. The mentality is still the same. This is what they will offer you when they crash the economy. And if you're smart, you won't accept it. Because people who would do something like this to you with the control they have now would do even worse things with worldwide control. Redsilver J, all I gotta say.